Hey guys, Mr. King here. Today we're going to be talking about human impact on land and water. And we've been talking about natural resources, and we've broken those natural resources down into two categories. They can either be renewable or non-renewable. And if you remember, renewable means it can come back by itself or by natural processes within 100 years or less. Non-renewable means it cannot come back within 100 years. And so the two things we'll be talking about today, land is categorized as a non-renewable resource because land cannot regenerate itself within 100 years or less. If you plow over a bunch of trees and build a mall there, that land is not going to be able to renew itself and be used again for a long time. Water, on the other hand, is a renewable resource because of the water cycle and the process that allows the water to evaporate and condense and then precipitate back down. That recycles that water and almost cleans it. So the big question today is, do we help or do we harm the environment? What is our overall impact as humans on the environment? First off, destroying the land is one thing we as humans do a lot of. And human activities can destroy the habitats of other organisms. You can see in this picture below there are many trees that have been knocked down, and you can imagine the number of squirrels and birds and other organisms that lived in this forest prior to it being knocked down. Now, the reason why we knock down these habitats is plowing over the trees to harvest them for furniture or to build homes or for paper. Lots of different resources come from trees. And then as we plow through the trees, that allows us to create open land for field, for planting crops. And these are all different activities that are used to generate income. And it's all about making money from knocking these things down. And so although the forest would be a nice habitat for many organisms, it does not provide a profit for many people. And so people have the idea that if you're not making money from it, then it's kind of a waste of space. And so we destroy those habitats, which is very unfortunate because it doesn't do us any good in the sense of creating money. And so even though it's beautiful to look at and it's homes for habitats or for many animals, it just does not do what humans feel it needs to do for the most part. Now, there's definitely people who are trying to conserve it, and we've talked about conservation of natural resources and how we try to preserve the environment and keep it the same so that the animals can have a nice habitat to live in. But overall, I would say we have a pretty negative impact on the amount of habitats we destroy by plowing things down to build schools and roads and homes and things like that. Using the land, all the things we use in our everyday lives take some amount of land to produce. Now, I picked the most simple thing I could think of, and I think of a PBJ, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, is a pretty simple thing that most of us consume at some point in our life. So here's the amount of space it takes to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You see the first picture, we have a man standing in a field. That's a peanut field. So you harvest the peanuts, and then you have strawberries from a strawberry field, and then you have wheat to make the bread. And all of those resources have to be taken to a factory. I have a peanut butter factory. You can see the peanut butter going through the line there. And then right next to that is a picture of a jelly factory. And then you also need a grocery store to sell it. So if you hold a peanut butter jelly sandwich in your hand, you might think, oh, this doesn't take up much space. But think of all the space that it took to create it. You have these giant fields and these giant factories and giant supermarkets that are just taking up tons of land, all for that peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So although it seems like a real simple thing, it's actually not. It's a huge amount of land required to make our needs or to meet our needs. So what takes up land? Houses, malls, roads, factories take up land. Food, clothing, jobs, and homes all take up land. Basically anything that you are going to live in or any place you're going to work, it takes up some amount of land. Our school takes up some amount of land. It would be very difficult for me to teach you guys if we had to sit outside. It would be really cold in the winter and it would be really rainy at times. It'd be really hard to learn. So our schools definitely take up some land. Food, as we talked about with peanut butter and jelly, take up a lot of land. Clothing, you got to grow cotton in the farms. And so everything takes up some amount of land. And the more things we want or the more things we need, the more space and land we need to make that happen. So some laws protect against habitat loss and help us use land wisely. For instance, if you want to build a highway, you can't just knock down all the trees in the area and let it be. You can see there's beautiful forest on both sides of these roads. They make sure that if you're going to build something, you have to make an attempt to restore part of the habitat. So we just built a mire in Stevensville a couple years ago. And when they came in and built that mire, they were concerned about that large field was a home for many different organisms. And so they had to do some sort of nature restoration in where they could provide a place for the animals to maybe continue living out their life in that area. So you can see there's different trees around mire and different places to establish a habitat. So they can't entirely wipe it out. And this is good because you don't make the organisms completely relocate. And we've talked about the balance between predator and prey. And when you move from one ecosystem to another, that can cause a lot of problems. So we try to keep the organisms in their same area. And that's what some of the laws force you to do. If you're going to build a brand new mall, you have to do some sort of relocation for those organisms or make it so they could try to stay there and still live out their lives and create their niche and meet their role in the ecosystem. So where does the garbage go? Besides in your trash can and then out to the side of the curb, it goes in the landfills. Most of it is buried in landfills, and here's what happens in a landfill. And a lot of times you just think it disappears and goes away, but check this out.
According to the EPA, the average American produces about 4 pounds of garbage per day. That's nearly 3/4 of a ton during the course of a year. The trash that doesn't get composted or recycled inevitably ends up in a landfill. The Middlesex County landfill is a 700-acre facility that sees more than 240 trucks drop their loads per day, 80% of which is household waste.
When a truck first comes into the facility, it goes through our queuing area and it's weighed at the scale facility. After that, depending on where we're dumping on any given day, it'll follow one of the haul roads up to the actual tipping area. The big misconception about landfills is that it's an open store of trash. Actually, the tipping area, which is referred to as the work face, is about 15,000 square feet. And at the end of the day, that fact will be covered. We cover that for odors, vectors, fire control, and to keep the litter from blowing around.
There was a time, more than 40 years ago, when open dumps had very little regulation to protect the environment. But modern landfills have come a long way since then.
Since the 1970s, environmental regulations were developed on the state and federal level to control what happens when garbage is dumped.
The key to that control is the use of a liner system.
Basically, this landfill has what they call a double composite liner. It means it has 2 liners. It has 2 synthetic liners and 2 clay liners. So the idea is as liquids collect inside the landfill and settle down on the bottom, they hit the confining layer of the lining system and they travel in this sand layer and ultimately make their way to one of our numerous leachate handling stations and are ultimately pumped over to our wastewater treatment plant in Sayreville.
Environmental educator Susan Lewicki illustrates the concept using this model of a layered landfill.
I'm going to simulate a little rain by just pouring some water through the top. Inevitably, the water starts to carry all sorts of whatever's decomposing down to the bottom. The surrounding landscape does not receive the leachate. It's going to be contained within the liner.
And while leachate is contained and treated, a product of the landfill's decomposition, methane, is actually offering some benefit.
Methane is captured very simply. We just drill holes down into the landfill, and this open hole, we backfill that hole with stone. And then we put some perforated pipe down in the stone. And what we've done is we created a corridor for the landfill gas to escape from outside of the landfill.
The captured methane is a viable fuel source, which is then used by the county wastewater operation.
If you can contain and treat the leachate, it's not resulting in groundwater contamination. If you can collect the methane, that can be used as a natural resource. That's positive.
I really believe that the reuse, the recycling, the reduction of waste has taken place as industries and as residents understand that they can definitely impact the amount of trash that they generate. When you put it on the curb, it just doesn't disappear. It has to go somewhere.
So as laws make it used to be you could just dump your garbage in the dump and there wasn't any liner or anything, and all the liquids would penetrate down into the ground and it would contaminate the water supply, and that led to a lot of different problems. Now we have regulations where you have to have liner that kind of holds all that, they call it leachate, in. That's kind of like another word for dirty water, it would be an easy way to think of it. And then they collect that dirty water and they send it to the water treatment plant, and you can actually reuse that and put it back through the cycle again. And so all those things are done to help make it a safer process for the environment. And that's been a really good thing that those laws have been passed because it was doing a lot of damage. So we've got bad types of garbage. Any material that can harm a living thing by interfering with life processes is called a pollutant. Garbage that contains dangerous chemicals or other pollutants is called hazardous waste. And anytime you have anything mixing with like your water supply, even when you're taking a shower, the soap is a pollutant because it's mixing with the water, and it makes it so that water can't be used by a different organism. For instance, you can't drink soapy water without getting sick. That would be bad for you. So all those are pollutants, anything that kind of can harm the way things are going. Once again, land is a renewable or non-renewable resource. You can't get back to what you started with. So what about the water? Only a small amount of Earth's water can be used for drinking. And we know it's renewable, but the amount that is actually available is 0.01%. Now it shows on this graph 2.5% is fresh water, but a lot of that fresh water is frozen in glaciers and it's not available for us to use. And so the actual drinkable, usable, showerable, bathable, that part of the water that we can actually use that goes through the water cycle is a very, very small percentage. And that's why we got to be real careful with the amount of water we use. So we do a lot of things that cause water pollution, that can pollute it and cause problems. And countries are working on it. They're working to reduce water pollution by putting in different laws and having different procedures in place. But as you'll see here, it's a big problem, and we don't think about it a lot because we live in the United States where life is pretty good. But throughout the rest of the world, there are a lot of difficulties.
Some estimates say 2017, nearly 15 million people are going to be without water.
Water is becoming more and more scarce. Stark warnings of disastrous consequences are repeatedly issued. Just what is the scale of the water shortage issue worldwide? And what can be done about it? This is Inside Story.
We're drinking the same water as the dinosaurs did, so how can we have a crisis? And the answer to that is that we are using water in an unsustainable way.
They say the next great war will not be fought over oil, over money, not even over human rights.
Water consumption is a serious problem because as the world gets increasingly crowded, we're also getting increasingly thirsty. 1.1 billion people don't have access to sufficient water. The problem is getting worse. Water use growing at twice the rate of the world's population. The problem is particularly pronounced in Asia, as 60% of the world's population possess just 36% of the world's fresh water, whereas Europe has 8% of the world's population and 13% of the world's fresh water.
So some countries have more
2
water than
buckets
they
of
need.
safe water a day is the minimum a child needs to live. 4,000 children die every day because they don't even have that. In sub-Saharan Africa, 43% of children drink unsafe water, and 1 in 5 dies before their 5th birthday.
More mouths, less water.
Now that temperatures are rising, villagers in India's northern Uttar Pradesh state are facing a severe scarcity of drinking water.
People have to use 100-foot-long rope to bring water from the well. We are in trouble as there is a lack of drinking water. We have to get drinking water from nearly 2 miles away.
So to us, it might not seem like a big problem, but to the rest of the world, it definitely is. There's definitely an issue with the amount of water that people have to use for their everyday needs, and we take it for granted. You guys probably woke up this morning and brushed your teeth and maybe took a shower and probably took your time in the shower and used a lot of water and didn't really think anything of it. And maybe if today in school, if you were thirsty, you just walked to the drinking fountain and got a drink. And we're really lucky to have the access to water we do in the United States. But throughout the world, it is not that way. And so that's why water pollution is such a disputed topic, because it seems like why would we have to worry about it? We've always got it here in the United States, but worldwide that is not always the case. All right, guys, so write some good summaries. Hopefully this gets you thinking about the world you live in and what you can do. This is really important because this is your Earth. We only get one of them, and whatever you do, that impact is going to last. So write some good questions for each other and take that quiz, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great night.